Everything in the end does have to be translated back to hardware. Nothing can compete completely virtual here. I think really what's going on is there are two parallel journeys that are playing out now, both of which have the word cloud put in front of them. One is a personal journey about individuals, and that is a journey which was recently underlined by Apple's iCloud announcement, which is really a journey into a world where things are fundamentally information-centric rather than device-centric. All of us are going to be characterized by a body of digital information that's going to have to live with us our whole lives, longer, we hope, than any device that we hold in our hands. And there are a lot of challenges about that. It means that information fundamentally has to be stored outside of the device. When you think about it, it probably has to be stored in ways that are not dictated by the schema of any one application, because it's not just devices that are going to come and go, applications are going to come and go. So this body of information that characterizes us as an individual, it's a very interesting question as to not only where will that be stored and how will it be stored, but by whom and who will have control over it, and who will have monetization rights to your personal information. And that is being played out as we go, and that body of information will come to dictate more and more the characteristics of devices. Devices will have to cleave to that body of information rather than the information cleaving to the device, which is what the applications as we have it today. So that's a very big journey that you see playing out in the consumer side, and it has interesting implications on the infrastructure because people operating in that space, Facebook, Yahoo, etc., have already had to evolve architectures that have to deal with data sets far larger than we find in the enterprise. So that's not for nothing that out of that space come to do with Cassandra and React, etc. So a lot of these new data architectures are coming out of that consumer world. At the same time, there's a journey that's going through in the enterprise space where enterprises fundamentally want to become more efficient in the infrastructure. There's a huge problem in enterprise today. People are spending too much on just keeping boring stuff running. And businesses over the next 10 years are going to face a huge issue that if they're sitting on 10 and 20-year-old code bases that are written for an era of paper bills, they're not going to be able to service this new generation of consumers who are experiencing information in a very different way with those old batch-oriented architectures. So even more profound than the transformation of infrastructure that has to happen is over the next 10 years, it's going to be a transformation of applications that has to happen. One of the ways that I sort of unfairly try and illustrate this infrastructure journey that has to happen and say from an infrastructure point of view, we've always said that cloud is more about how than about where. The really interesting and profound things about cloud are the automation that you need to achieve, not exactly where is the computing run. We recently announced something called Cloud Foundry. We can talk about it in a minute, but that was work was done partly by a couple of guys that we recruited out of Google over 2 years ago now. And they had worked on Google's internal infrastructure. And one day it occurred to me to ask them, how many system administrators do they think Google has for their million-plus servers? And so I emailed Mark and Derek, and they had a debate about what is a system administrator and who is one and who isn't, and et cetera, and emailed their buddies, et cetera. And eventually the answer came back, they think it's about 1 to 1,000. I think Google has roughly 1,000 system administrators for this million-plus servers that they have. So of course, armed with that information, I immediately turned around to Mark Egan, our own CIO, who has the world's most thankless job for the advice that he gets. And said, Mark, from an IT perspective, how many physical servers do we have at Google? It turns out at Microsoft, at VMware.
I'm fearing we know what's on your mind.
30 years in the industry, little starts to
Is it you all was in the headline that you are the next Microsoft? Microsoft is that.
I have no comment. Yeah.
That's okay.
It turns out, that our ratio is more like 1 to 20 to 1 to 50, as opposed to 1 to 1,000. And that's really what has to happen. When you talk about cloud from an infrastructure perspective, we've got to get it to the point where enterprises, whether they're consuming their infrastructure being produced internally or externally, are doing it at similar levels of efficiency. Otherwise, we're never going to free up the funds to tackle the real issues that enterprises face, which is they're sitting on archaic code bases that are going to become real barriers for them to be competitive in the future.
So it's like